Welcome back. Grab a snack and let's try to analyze recent tariffs' impact on economy. Enjoy watching. Trump's tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, a masterclass in economic self-sabotage. Tariffs, the magical tool Trump wielded like a sledgehammer in his grand quest to make America great again. The idea? Punish Canada, Mexico, and especially China for their unfair trade practices. The result? Higher prices for Americans, a struggling farming sector, supply chain chaos, and a trade war that made absolutely everyone miserable. But hey, at least it sounded tough on Twitter, right? So let's take a sarcastic stroll down memory lane and analyze how these brilliant tariffs backfired on the US economy, how they left Canada and Mexico shaking their heads in disbelief, and how China, the supposed target, found ways to turn the tables. Trump's tariff policies, a genius move or not? The master plan to annoy Canada and Mexico. In 2018, Trump decided that Canada and Mexico, our closest allies and trade partners, were suddenly national security threats because, their steel and aluminum might be weaponized against us. So naturally, he slapped 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imports from both countries. Nothing says thanks for being good neighbors like a trade war, right? Why these tariffs made total sense? Not really. The US government pretended it was about national security, but everyone knew it was just a strong-arm tactic for renegotiating NAFTA. Apparently, US manufacturers needed protection from those dangerous maple syrup-loving Canadians and taco-making Mexican steelworkers. Canada and Mexico's response: oh, it's on. Canada, clearly thrilled by this betrayal, fired back with $16.6 billion in retaliatory tariffs on everything from ketchup to whiskey, because nothing screams revenge like making Americans pay more for their backyard barbecues. Mexico, not to be outdone, smacked tariffs on pork, apples, cheese, and bourbon, a perfect recipe for ruining American farmers' profits. Businesses relying on North American supply chains were delighted to see their costs skyrocket overnight. The punchline? After months of unnecessary economic drama, Trump eventually removed these tariffs as part of the USMCA deal. So, all that economic chaos? Completely avoidable. The epic showdown with China, a trade war that backfired. Of course, Trump saved his biggest tariff tantrum for China, the evil mastermind behind America's trade deficit. He slapped tariffs on over $360 billion worth of Chinese goods, and China, unsurprisingly, retaliated with tariffs on $110 billion of U.S. exports. Brilliant outcomes of this move. American farmers watched their largest customer, China, disappear overnight, as Beijing responded by sourcing soybeans, pork, and other products from Brazil. U.S. companies that relied on cheap Chinese imports, electronics, machinery, and textiles, saw their costs explode because nothing says pro-business like making it harder for businesses to operate. American consumers got to experience higher prices on everyday goods, from smartphones to washing machines. The Phase 1 deal, a glorified Band-Aid. After 2 years of economic pain, Trump proudly announced the Phase 1 trade deal, 2020, which basically forced China to promise it would buy more American goods. Spoiler alert, it didn't hit those targets. Meanwhile, most tariffs stayed in place, keeping prices high for Americans. Victory. How Trump's tariffs blessed the U.S. economy, sarcasm intended. Higher prices for everyone, the American dream. Since tariffs are essentially a tax on imports, companies pass the costs down to consumers. A study found that the average American household paid an extra $1,300 per year thanks to these genius tariffs. That's almost enough to cover a week of rent in New York. Farmers got the short end of the stick. China, once the biggest buyer of American soybeans, suddenly stopped buying from U.S. farmers and turned to Brazil instead. To keep American farmers from revolting, the government had to bail them out with $28 billion in subsidies. Basically, Trump started a fire, then paid taxpayers to put it out. Trump kept saying the tariffs would bring back U.S. manufacturing. Instead, companies paid more for raw materials, had to lay off workers, and some even moved production overseas to avoid tariffs. Genius. The auto industry, which relies on steel and aluminum, had to raise prices, leading to job cuts and factory closures. Trade deficit, the thing Trump wanted to fix but made worse. Despite all the chest thumping, the trade deficit with China barely changed because, surprise, Americans still wanted cheap goods. Instead of fixing trade with China, businesses shifted supply chains to Vietnam, India, and Mexico. The deficit didn't disappear, it just moved to another country. How Canada and Mexico reacted. Annoyed but adaptive. Oh, we'll remember this. Canada and Mexico learned not to trust U.S. trade policies after Trump's tariff games. They both started diversifying their trade partners, making them less dependent on the U.S. USMCA, NAFTA 2.0, but with a new name for branding purposes. After months of drama, the U.S., Canada, and Mexico agreed on a renegotiated NAFTA, now called USMCA because Trump wanted a different acronym. Did the U.S. get a better deal? Not really. The agreement wasn't drastically different, but at least it gave businesses stability. How China outplayed the U.S., because of course it did. Economic slowdown? No problem. Yes, China's economy took a hit, but Beijing responded with currency devaluation, government stimulus, and new trade deals with Europe and Africa. Unlike the U.S., which alienated allies, China used this opportunity to build stronger global trade relationships. Manufacturing shifted, but not where Trump wanted. Instead of moving production back to the U.S., manufacturers just relocated from China to Vietnam, India, and Mexico. China didn't lose control of supply chains, it just outsourced lower-end production while keeping high-tech industries growing. Conclusion: the tariff experiment that proved nothing. After years of economic turbulence, what did Trump's tariffs achieve? Higher prices for American consumers, billions in bailouts for struggling farmers, increased costs for U.S. manufacturers, leading to job losses. Supply chains moved to other countries instead of coming back to the U.S. The trade deficit remained because, shockingly, tariffs don't change consumer behavior overnight. But hey, at least it looked great in campaign speeches. Nothing screams winning like paying more for the same stuff while alienating your biggest trading partners. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like or dislike this video. Hit notification. Enjoy your day.